Hey everybody, it's Kentari. I'm back again with Christ in Comic Books. Today we're doing another piece to doing our Death Note series. Guys, I finally finished Volume 1 for the second time. And what I mean for the second time is a really long time ago, of course. And now I'm picking it back up so that I can actually effectively speak to each volume. What's being seen in the actual story versus, the relation between what is being brought up in the story to my actual faith and actually speaking on these things. Because, like I said, the reason we're doing Christ in comic books is because I believe that there is a strong spiritual relation between what is used to create comics and the actual Bible and its material and the faith that we have in Jesus Christ and the belief in God. I believe those things are very real and very applicable. So that's one of the things that we're looking at by going back and finishing up with Volume 1. I'll be honest with you, I forgot how tedious it is to read, and I'm not going to say manga. Manga is easy to read, but when you're reading a Tsugumi Oba and a Takeshi Obata written illustrated story, you are going to be in it and you're going to be trying to read it over and over, read the long thought bubbles, the long words and everything, and trying to grasp what's being said. You're grasping the art's application to what's being said, and it's just so much to actually take in. So that's something that I was actually thinking through, as I was reading, was making sure that I wasn't missing anything, making sure that anything that's pointed out in them, I'm going to properly speak to and grasp. So thank you guys for being patient with me. It shouldn't take me 3 videos to do 1 volume. So I'm going to try and bring these down to 1 volume per video. All right, so we finished up Volume 1, and thank goodness, I'm so glad we finished. We move on to Volume 2. Okay, so we left off with L and how L's kind of made somewhat of an introduction. The police force are meeting together and they're contemplating what they're going to need, who they're going to need to be able to figure these things out. And L has kind of made somewhat of an introduction. You see a bit of him. You see a partial picture of him. You don't get to see his face yet. At no point in Volume 1 do you get a glimpse of his face. I'm going to clear that up right now. But we're at a point now from where we left off where the International Crime Organization has come to get the International Crime Police Organization. They've come together, otherwise known as Interpol, to speak around what they're seeing that's happening. So they, of course, acknowledge, all right, we're seeing a bunch of our major criminals suffer from cardiac arrest. And there's so many of them, and there's it's so consistent in how they're being hit that they feel as though it's got to be somebody. So you have a whole large group of people from different countries, Japan, the United States, Russia, other nations, all coming together to talk this through and figure out, who's killing these people off. Is someone killing these people off? Is it a mass attack? Is this an act of terrorism? Is it just coincidence? We need to figure out what in the world it is that's actually happening right now, because this isn't making sense and we don't have answers. There's 2 parts that play into them trying to figure this thing out. It's good because, okay, criminals are dying. Yeah, sure. But it's a deeper issue because you can't just simply kill people off because they're evil, because they're a problem. You don't just get that right to just kill people off. They already recognize that immediately as of concern. That's why they're looking into this. The other aspect to that, too, is how they themselves can actually be perceived in the midst of this situation. So it's not simply a moral compass conversation that's taking place here. This is something to mediate how the world is going to be viewing how criminals are being handled. Is this an act of the police force? Is this an act of the government? Is this an act worldwide? That the human beings are thinking these things through also. So for them to come together, for Interpol to come together and to discuss this, is them trying to manage the situation before it gets out of hand. So they're trying to figure out what in the world is going on. So long story short, with this particular portion of Volume 1, you get to the place where L is fully introduced into being the one that's going to lead this case, handle this case, and figure out what exactly is going on. And if I'm correct, even in the midst of this conversation, L points out that he believes that someone is actually doing this, although he doesn't have everything pieced together. He does speak to how he believes somebody is killing these criminals. Another thing that he has narrowed down is that he believes that they're operating out of Japan. Now, when he makes that declaration, the police officers, the detectives of Japan react immediately as how could he have made that assumption already? How could he have come to this conclusion so fast? How could he? In a sense, you kind of see that twofold. You kind of see that from one standpoint of it being, how could he come to that conclusion so fast? The other aspect of it is how can they accuse us? Because no matter how you look at it, if someone is taking in power to be able to do this, if they're operating out of a certain country, you have to think, are they doing it by themselves or do they have a supporting faction behind them that could be governmental that is pushing for these things to even happen? So that has to be cause for concern. But he has narrowed down, L has narrowed down that this must be happening out of Japan. And so he wants to work. He's going to be working with the detectives of Japan to figure out who it is and what we can do to stop it. So he sets in motion a plan to address this. So he goes ahead and he, coordinates with them. This panel's over to Light walking home from school and talking with the guys, and they're talking about, people are calling him Kira, which means murderer, but in other aspects of Japanese, language, it also could mean God. So with Light hearing this conversation, they're joking back and forth, and then they're talking through, well, we better be good or otherwise we're going to be killed. I don't know. I think he's doing the right thing by doing this. That's the little man conversation they're having. But Light's just kind of taking it in. And of course, Ryuk is observing the conversation, observing even how Light handles himself throughout this conversation. So we shift here to him getting home, and he goes to look it up online, and he sees, wow, people are really seeing Kira as being this actual god of justice, this person that is ridding the world of evil. He's actually acting against evil. And that's something that the people have been hungering for, in all honesty, is for someone to act against evil. I'll pause here for a second because this plays a very important role in us looking at, the spiritual side of it. Because people wonder, if God is real, where is God when there's so much evil in the world? The main question people have for a Christian is, how can there be a God with so much evil? How can there be a God with this happening, with that happening, with all of this suffering, with all of this pain, with all of these mistakes that have been made, with all these evil that people have portrayed, with all the evil that people who claim a faith in him have portrayed? This is the constant question people look for. Why isn't God acting on mankind's behalf? So God has, as we already know, God has already acted on man's behalf. But the way that God has acted on man's behalf is that, one, when the fall took place, I'm going to be very brief about this because I want to get back to finishing up Volume 1. But when man fell from having eaten from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, the plan had to be set forth at that time. So, and what I mean by that plan having been set forth, it wasn't as if he, wrote it down and, set things in motion and was pushing for things. Because when you read the Old Testament, this is something very important. When you read the Old Testament, you got to see the difference between when men are making decisions and when God is speaking to certain individuals to do certain things. It's not as though God is puppeting people through these things. God is simply setting in motion what needs to happen. Hey, he told Noah, this is what I need you to do. They take it even farther back. He told Adam and Eve what they needed to do. Even in the midst of the fall, they were still responsible for doing what they were told to do, even though they had sacrificed a lot of the power that they had from having eaten of the tree, but they still had that responsibility set forth. God spoke things into Cain, wisdom into Cain. Whether or not he abided by it was up to him. God gave a covenant unto Abraham as Abraham came from his father's house and left his father's house according to what God had told him to do, to go and to, find the promised land. The covenant relationship was established between the two of them, that they would become the great nation that God has called them to become. What would be birthed from Isaac? What would be birthed from Jacob? The nation of Israel being born, all 12 sons being born from Israel, also known as Jacob, someone I would love to cover with you guys at another point. But you see that all of that wasn't simply just to, let me just protect a people. Let me just cover a people. But he was establishing a people. And that was just like what we would call in writing, literature, a foreshadowing of what he's wanting to do for the world. I'm going to redeem you. I'm going to set you apart from the rest of the world. I'm going to teach you how to be a great nation, which is what he did Old Testament-wise but of course, according to the standard of living in the world. And then he gets to that point where when he brings Jesus into the world, when Jesus is teaching people, this is what it means to fulfill what it is that the nation of Israel was actually taught. This is actually what he meant by this. This is it in its fullness. Now we can go and operate at a nationwide level, but from person to person to fulfill what God has called us to do. That is what he does to ensure the salvation of men. Now, it isn't a mass destruction of evil. No. But what it is implanting a light in everybody else. No pun intended there, simply because the character we're talking about right now is light. But, it's him making sure that the light is spread from person to person. That corruption is being overwhelmed by light, because darkness can't dwell in the presence of light. You can say that scripturally, yes, but you also know that scientifically. If light is there, shadows flee to the corners. Okay, we've already known that. But let's double back. So they're recognizing that a lot of people are seeing Kira to actually be of godlike status. They're recognizing him as that. Now, for some people, that could be, an actual deity. For other people, it could be there's someone that's doing a good thing by killing off these people, no matter who or what it is. Thank goodness. So that's what all of that means. And you kind of hear a wrestling between oneself when you listen to light. You see light in one aspect, speaking of how some people would respond to this, and if we were in class, they would say it's not right to kill someone, no matter how evil they are. But then you get this true illustration of how people really feel when you see these things online, and they see that, yes, finally evil is being dealt with. Because so he gets to that point of wrestling with thinking, this is how it is going to be perceived. I can understand people's perspective on this. And the other aspect of it is people are finally getting it. People are seeing my purpose of what I'm trying to do here, why I've done all of this. And it's got him excited in one sense, in another sense kind of going mad about it, like losing his mind a little bit. You see a sense of craziness in his eyes as the way it is illustrated. And Ryuk is witnessing the corruptive nature or the corruptive level of a human being. So to zoom through here, in the midst of him wrestling with this, you get this image of a person on screen because he goes to turn on the TV, and this person goes to call out Kira, otherwise Light. He goes to call out Kira, and he calls out Kira, saying that what he's done, what he's doing, letting the people know that we do see him, that the police are going to be on top of him, that we're going to address him, we're going to catch you, we know what you're doing. And in the midst of this presentation, what you notice is that there is a nameplate in front of the person that's speaking. His name is Lind L. Taylor. And so what's happening in this is Lind L. Taylor is portraying himself as L. So in this moment, you'll see that even the police force is like, wow, no one's ever seen L's face. L's always in hiding. L's always in a secure location. For him to come out over this case must be serious. So when he comes out to them, the crazy thing about this is that as he's antagonizing Kira, you see that Lind L. Taylor falls over from a heart attack after he finishes what he has to say. Because, of course, Light has written his name in his book, in the Death Note, and he kills him. So then you have this very well illustrated L pop up on the screen, and Kira gets called out for it. And they let him know that, hey, this person that you just killed was actually a criminal that was set to be on death row today, but we've brought him on here to do this. So Light has killed this person. L has revealed that's not actually me. I'm actually me, and I want you to try and come and kill me. Go ahead, try and kill me. In the midst of him trying to call him out, he's pointing out how he's figured out everything. He's pointed out that I know that you're in Japan. He's pointed out that I even know that your first kill was this person who was, like I said in my first, I think it was my second video, when you were holding these people hostage, when these kids were being held hostage, and the man just fell over from a heart attack and the hostages got away. I think it was in the high school. He pointed that out. He's like, that was probably you just testing whatever power it is that you even have for you to have done that. That was one of your first kills. And it's like, wow, that's revealing the depth of which L has went to pinpoint who it is that's doing all of these things, for him to go to this level of being able to isolate at what point everything kind of started by pointing out this first kill. And it has Light kind of aback a bit to see that someone's got him, or someone's actually kind of aware of him and what he's doing at this level, is recognizing him as being the opposition, being the problem. And so in the midst of this, you notice that L is taunting him, challenging him, say, hey, come kill me. kill me. Go ahead, do it. Now, of course, here we do, of course, later see that that was him just gambling. He didn't know if it was going to happen or not, but it will give him the opportunity to see, okay, he can't kill me because he can't see my face. He can't kill. That gave him another clue as to what is needed for him to pull off what it is that he's pulling off. So that's one of the things that they that L does to help kind of, narrow the search. And that really gets Light riled up. So Light goes talking off like, I will take this person down. I will figure out who this is, and I will dispose of you. Now, in the midst of him going to say that, of course, L is saying the same thing. I will find you. I will dispose of you. I will bring you down. And this is where the challenge starts. You have a detective that's looking to do justice right. And then you have the young teenager, great intellectual, one who's thought everything out in detail, who's looking to bring justice in a new light, pun intended, to the world. So they're about to go head to head. So what this ends up leading forward into is you have Light, and what he's doing is he's kind of, I think he's just gotten home. His sister's coming in the room, and in the midst of talking with Ryuk before the sister comes in the room, Ryuk is wondering, like, well, what are you going to do? This guy's going to catch you, this, that, and the third. What's your plan? And he's like, it's okay. I have a one-up. So in the midst of him figuring out this one-up, you find in one separate panel that they're finally able to go home after this case has been done. The detectives are able to go home. The head detective is able to finally leave and go home. And we find out that the head detective over this actual case for Japan is Light Yagami's father. So Light Yagami's dad is actually the head of the case for figuring out who Kira is, capturing him, having him arrested, whatever that case may be. His dad is the head of the entire case. So with that being a part of it, one of the things that Light reveals is, I have access to my dad's files without my dad or any other detective being able to pinpoint that it's me. So I can keep an eye on criminals. I can keep an eye on what my dad is talking about and doing, so I can be one step ahead of them at all times. And so it allows for him, one, to plan who to kill, how to kill, what times to kill, what they've discovered, what they've discussed in their detective offices. So he's able to have that very big advantage. And one of the things that he's also getting to bet on is, which is later, pointed out, is that with everything that's happening, with the way that L is handling these things, there are going to be some people on his team, on the Japan team, that are going to willing to look to fill this out. And that shows that he's really thought everything through and considering all factors, being that at least 3 of them so far, at least what's illustrated in the book, resign immediately from even being a part of this anymore. Here's something that I thought was interesting, and I'm going to stop. I'm going to speak on this for a minute. But what was interesting about that was, with them 3 resigning, the 3 don't just like, oh, we quit, we're scared, we don't want to die. They don't want to die. They're considering their families when they're deciding not to die. But they're also considering what L has done and what Kira is capable of, how he can do the things that he does. So they've thought to, not fully, but on par at the level at which Kira, and a little bit of what L is thinking when they're concerned with what Kira is actually capable of. So here's the thing that I wanted to speak to about that is, I understand that Light is a very intellectual character, but the other aspect to Light being a very intellectual character is Light is a human being. The thing about human beings is, human beings are capable of very dark things. The Bible speaks about how in the Tower of Babel that Jesus was amazed at the imagination of human beings, being that they were able to come together, unite, and create a tower that could reach into the heavens. They were unified and able to establish this thing. But one of the things that God addressed immediately was that there's a dark side to such powerful imagination. So what he did was he split the language. That's where we get the language shift, where we get different cultures and different languages, different ways of communicating. And so they weren't able to work together to complete the Tower of Babel, and that was the end of that construction. So we know that it's not just about intellect that allows for some of the greatest creative things to come about. It's imagination. And it's that creative thought process. And that can go to a very great place in the advancement of humankind, but that can also go to a dark place, to the destruction of others, to other sufferings, to planning out how to come against other people. All of those things, those factors are being considered here, because we see that you don't have to be intellectual to be able to think through what you're going to do and how you're going to do it. even a regular person is capable of these very dark things. That's one thing that's so deep about the Garden of Eden storyline. I, of course, acknowledge it as a moment in history, but some people see it as a story, so I don't want to take that away from you. But what's so significant about that is what's so important to recognize is that when it came to excuse me, when it came to eating from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, they weren't simply eating and dying. Of course, there was a spiritual death that made them very carnal, that made them, natural people and not able to operate in their authority and their dominion as God has established them. That was taken from them when they ate from the tree. But if you notice, when they saw their nakedness, what they saw was each other's vulnerability. They saw how they could hurt one another. And that's something from a psychological level that has been observed about that moment in the Bible, is when you're able to see someone's nakedness, someone's vulnerability. When you're able to see that, then you can take advantage of them in that area. You can hurt them in that area. And that's, again, brings us back to the detectives that quit. That was their concern, is we're vulnerable to light. We're vulnerable, to Kira killing us off, while L is in a safe place and hiding, and he can't be touched. They considered these factors, and they made the wisest decision for their household, because that at the level of where they are, that's where they need to operate. So they chose to make sure to protect their family. We're going to keep ourselves alive first. So they quit. So, of course, we come to find out, and I'm going to kind of summarize the story a little bit more. Ryuk points out for Light, and two things. He points out, one, I'm not here for you or L. I'm just here to witness the story, but I'm being made uncomfortable because you're being followed. So it seems as though, one, Light is being shadowed by a detective. Two, L has sent for these detectives from America to be able to spy on Japan's detective team, because he has also been able to isolate that the person that is Kira has some relation or connection to the detective team of Japan. So for him to be able to operate at the level that he's done so far. So he has them being shadowed so he can pinpoint if Kira is within those detectives, their family, and their friends. So Light is currently being shadowed. So Ryuk also points out for him, again, like, I'm not doing this for you. I'm not doing this for L. I'm just letting you know because it's making me uncomfortable. And so with this being a very talkative instance, this kind of takes Light off guard a little bit. So when he gets back home, Ryuk continues to give more things. He tells Light, he tells Light a bit more about himself. He tells him about the lifespan of Shinigami, being that Shinigami can expand their lifespan with their kills. If they were to take someone's life and they had, let's say, 20 more years to live, and they were going to live till they were 40. If they were killed at 20, then the Shinigami himself would get 20 more years of life. But the thing that's odd about the Shinigami is that they can be so lazy and become so bored that they won't do anything to continue to expand their life. So they actually would end up dying at the end of that anyway. So that's one of the things he points out for Light, as well as their eyes allow for them to be able to see the name of anyone that they look at. And if Light would like to have that power, he can make that deal with him. The thing about the deal is it cuts the lifespan of the individual in half. So if he had 50 years of life guaranteed, that would cut him down, if he did the deal, to 25. So he proposed this to Light, just to let him know that it's there in case he wanted it. And Light was kind of taken aback by that. He's like, sounds nice, don't need it. I would actually like the wings, because having wings would allow me to go and do great things. That's a godlike thing to have. So that actually kind of surprised him to find out that Ryuk had so much to work with, so much to say all of a sudden, and he wanted him to make sure that he had no other secrets. But Ryuk told him, hey, I'm just telling you this so that you're aware for you. So again, we have this person shadowing him. Light is trying to figure out how he could deal with this person, and he makes two actions. So one of which that takes place before this is he establishes for his drawer on his desk to where it can basically self-explode if anyone goes to try and research whether or not he has a notebook. If the people shadowing him are able to get a warrant and search his room, he has it fixed to where the book would be destroyed. Now, he has established a very well-designed mechanism to make sure that takes place. Again, this really speaks to his intellect. This really speaks to his intellect, because he's going to be able to, make sure that all avenues are covered. So that's what's powerful about that. And the last thing that this kind of leads to is he wants to make sure that he can deal with the person following him, right? So how am I going to figure out this person's name? How am I going to figure out, get rid of him without putting all eyes on me? So what Light ends up trying to do is test the extent to which the Death Note works. One of the other aspects of the Death Note is it doesn't have to only be by heart attack, but you can actually write out how somebody ends up dying. So he does a 6-person test to figure out how he can kill people. 3 of which did not work to succession because it would have required the people to be a long distance away to be able to meet the destination by that certain time. So whatever was written never even happened. But there were 3 that did happen successfully. So it allowed him to figure out how much time did I have to work with, what kind of space I can make these decisions out of, as to whether or not what is written in the Death Note will actually happen. So what he uses that to do is he finds a criminal who had just recently, committed a crime, killed people, and is out on the street somewhere. So he has the picture, he has the name, and he uses that to his advantage. He calls the young lady up, and he reveals to Ryuk he's so playful about what he's capable of that he doesn't care about natural world things. And he's like, you'll be surprised to know, Ryuk, I'm really cool with the ladies. It's just like, that's such a conceited thing to say. But he sets up a date. He goes on this date with this girl. He goes to the bus stop. He gets on the bus, and he has it set to where, of course, he's being shadowed. The shadow guy sits behind him on the bus, on the back of the bus, and then the person gets who's the criminal he was looking for. He uses him. The criminal gets on the bus. He hijacks the bus. The criminal, holds everyone at gunpoint. He, sets everything up to where he's going to get a ransom or people are going to die. You move, you die, that kind of thing. And of course, it has the detective scrambled, this happens right now. And so then he gets to the point where Light writes a note. The detective sees the note. The detective stops Light from making a decision to play hero, which is, of course, all a part of Light's plan to figure out, everything he can about the agent that's following him. So with the agent telling him to stop, he's like, I can do that. Don't you do anything. Don't do anything dangerous. You can trust me. I'll handle it. And so Light questions him, how can I trust you? Show me proof. And that gets him to reveal his badge. And him revealing his badge, now Light knows exactly who he is. So it's perfect. Everything's going to plan. So Light puts the paper back up. Light shoves it in his pocket. He drops a piece of paper. He goes to reach down to get it. The criminal comes over to him and says, what are you doing? Don't touch that. What is this? You better not be writing notes. He picks it up. He sees it's just a note for the date. He gives it back to Light. Turns out it's a page out of the Death Note. Another aspect to the Death Note. If anyone touches the Death Note, they can see Ryuk. So Ryuk is on the bus with Light, and the criminal can see Ryuk. So he starts freaking out. He pulls out his gun. He starts popping off his gun at Ryuk. With Ryuk being immortal, he can't feel anything as far as those bullets go. That was another secret he revealed to Light. We can't die. We're immortal unless we just let our lifespan run out. So he's getting shot at. He's not dying. And so the criminal's freaking out. The people on the bus thinking, he's on drugs. He's on drugs. The criminal runs off the bus. He gets hit by the bus. And so everything that he got to witness and experience, we got to witness and experience the power of the Death Note. And even more so, what more Light could do. Here's what's so significant about that as we draw this video to a close is this, again, speaks to the magnitude at which human beings could do very divisive and dangerous things. And I can be honest with you, anyone who's read Death Note, anyone who's watched Death Note, anyone who's watched these videos hearing about how the Death Note works and what they could do with the Death Note, at some extent have thought, oh, I could do these things. I could work at this level with it. I could do this kind of attack or that kind of attack. I could deal with this kind of people or that kind of people. But again, it really just speaks to the depth at which human beings are capable of dark things. And I just want to say, be careful of operating at that level. Be careful of trying to really use your imagination because you don't know at what level you can destroy somebody's life, how you can hurt someone. You don't know what you're capable of. And Light is just playing with it, knowing what he's capable of, especially now that he has the Death Note. Well, thank you guys for watching. This is another installment of our series for Death Note, for Christ, and comic books. I hope you all have a blessed evening. Make sure that you hit that subscribe button. Join this channel. We'll be producing more videos. We'll continue this series and start even new ones. Thank you. Have a blessed one.